Okay, and welcome back, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. I hope you've had a chance to have a stretch the legs, do the emails, whatever you were doing. Manage, like myself, to grab a cup of tea. Well, I am English, so I drink tea. So, well, a big welcome back, everybody, and thank you for staying with us. We've still got people now slowly coming back into the fray of things. So I'll just keep going for a couple minutes with this afternoon's program. We've got BTL Surpass. We have a recorded video of John Dight. He can't unfortunately be here in person, so he sent a video, and we have Paddy McLaughlin and Ben Brady, who will pick up after the end of the video and answer any questions and answers, and that'll be our first session this afternoon. That'll then be followed by a session on assessment tools, chaired by our own Christine Hadid, and that will feature 3 presentations all around this use of the new tools and techniques and how some of the more exciting and innovative things going on around the world work, and how we can utilize and maximize the investments in those tools and those techniques. And Christine will then hand off and introduce our closing keynote of the day, Daniel Jarratt from Schmidt Futures. Really interested in hearing him, and indeed all the speakers this afternoon. So that's our program. And now I'm hoping that Paddy is just joining us. So what I'm now going to do is to hand over control and hope that Christine can run the video that we struggled to get running off of my machine this morning. Otherwise, we might have to ask Ben to run it directly from his machine and share. So just waiting. Paddy, are you there? Ben, are you there? Yes, you're both there.
Thank
Brilliant.
you for having us, Jeff.
Great stuff. Okay. Brian, are you in a position to run the video?
Yeah, Christine's coming in.
Oh, great stuff. Okay, one short question from this morning which came up again. Somebody asked again because they missed it. Unfortunately, we've missed Professor Naomi Winstone's keynote address this morning. She wasn't able to make it. We can't fit her in for tomorrow. She's not available. So we'll run her session as a podcast at some stage in future. One of a number of podcasts we run. They're really interesting. And we'll send you the details of that so that you don't miss out. So without further ado, hand over to Christine, and hopefully we can now run the video.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can hear Christine.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Ben and Paddy, in the video. I know we have John Dight speaking and sharing a message from Surpass. So I'm just going to get that started and then hand over to you two for the Q&A.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the BMC conference as much as I am. My name is John Dight, and I head up business development for Surpass in the US. Last year, I shared a roundup of some of the great projects the Surpass community had been working on around the world, and we got a lot of really positive feedback from people who were inspired by their stories. This year, I'd like to go a step further as we've had our inaugural Surpass Community Innovation Award this year. There were 4 finalists that were nominated from a really diverse spread of the industry, including language, welding, accounting, and even a national schools program. Each of these programs has pushed the boundaries of what can be done with the Surpass platform, and I'm delighted to be able to share their stories with you today. So to kick us off, here's Sharon Harvey, the CEO of Michigan Language Assessment.
Michigan Language Assessment is a not-for-profit organization based in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the USA, and we offer a range of English language qualifications for people whose first language isn't English. We offer 2 programs on the BTL Surpass platform, MET, or the Michigan English Test, which is a high-stakes adult exam used for higher education and professional purposes, and MET Go, which is a test for children. We are delighted to have been nominated for the Surpass Innovation Award for the digital version of the MET Go exam, and so let me tell you a little bit about that. Well, MET Go is an exam for 10 to 15-year-old children whose first language isn't English, and it tests all 4 skills, so reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Previously, MET Go was only offered in paper-based format, but then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Tens of millions of children weren't able to go to school, and so it became obvious that we needed to not only launch a digital version of this exam, but also enable at-home testing. Now, for our high-stakes MET exam, where we also offer both in-center and at-home testing, we only offer the at-home testing using Prometric's Pro Proctor service, which is a really robust remote proctoring service of the type you need for a high-stakes program. MET Go, though, is a test for children, and that kind of remote proctoring wasn't really appropriate for this program. And so we opted to enable our authorized test centers to offer the remote proctoring using platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And so for that reason, we opted to offer MET Go digital on the browser version of Surpass so that those programs would work. Now, MET Go digital is being delivered in children's homes from India and Indonesia to Mexico and Brazil. And these children have relatively low levels of English. There's not IT support in the homes. Internet bandwidth varies considerably. And so we had to try and build a test that would work as much as possible and be as intuitive as possible to use. So we have things like built-in tutorials. There's only forward navigation in the test so that the kids don't accidentally forget to take one section and lose out on marks. And we also had to think about comparability between the paper-based and digital versions. And so we built in timed breaks between the different skills, which is the same timing that exists in the paper-based exam. And we also only have limited replay of the listening section. If you take the test in a test center, you get to hear the listening twice. And so we had to make sure that that was replicated in the digital version of the exam. The speaking test is delivered on screen, and so we needed auto capture of the spoken responses to enable the test to be marked after the exam has been completed. So those are a few of the innovative features that are included in MET Go Digital, which has proven popular even after the pandemic. So hopefully we're delivering a test that people are enjoying using.
Some really great work there, configuring the interface to be as simple as possible for children to use and making full use of all the audio features. Next, I'd like to change tack completely and take a look at what TWI has been up to with their welding certification. Here's Rob Olsworth, their chief examiner, to tell us all about it.
Here at TWI, one of our specialities is in the training and certification of inspectors used in many sectors of engineering, from aerospace, nuclear, oil and gas, and construction. Every year, we train tens of thousands of candidates in dozens of countries, such as Europe, UK, UAE, Saudi, China, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, Canada, and many more. Due to this business model of going to various countries, we needed a flexible approach to our exam delivery method. Before Surpass, we used a paper-based exam. This had serious limitations for security, as these could easily become compromised. Exam compromises are the most serious concern we have. Our candidates are operating in some of the world's most critical infrastructure, where mistakes or incompetence could have a disastrous consequence. Surpass has given us reassurance that our exams are safe and the candidates that become qualified are performing at the correct level to justifiably hold the qualification and perform their job roles safely. Due to issues such as Wi-Fi restrictions, we also needed the flexibility to pre-download exams onto iPads and still deliver our exams in remote locations with the same protection and security as in one of our main centres we have. Our decision to use iPads rather than Android tablets was down to two factors. Firstly, we tried using just computer-based in our centres, but this didn't cover our remote location exams. After trying various types of computers from compute sticks to all-in-one computers, we tried to use tablets. Our second reason for using iPads came from our business choice to only use tablet delivery. When given the choice between an iPad or an Android device, the additional security features on the iPads are excellent. One of these is guided access. This locks the iPad down completely, allowing only the Surpass app to function, while also allowing the invigilator to have full control of the iPad before and after the exam, to connect to Wi-Fi for download and uploading of the exams. Currently, we are running thousands of exams globally a year through Surpass, with a vision to be totally electronic by mid-2023. We are currently using hundreds of iPads worldwide to deliver more and more exams. Additional benefits that we have also found that some other companies would also see are drastic reductions in turnaround times for results, from an average of 21 days to 5 days. Working with Surpass, we have also developed new exam formats and question types, such as drag and drop, missing word, and video-based questions that previously wouldn't have been possible using paper-based exams. We look forward to future developments from Surpass and working closely with them to ensure our material stays world-class.
As you can see, iPad delivery opens up all kinds of possibilities for testing candidates in the field doing practical exams, speeding up the results turnaround and enabling innovative items that can't be used when you're limited to paper and pencil. Next up, we have a national schools program, which Ben Rockcliffe from Alpha Plus is going to tell us all about.
We lead a multi-contractor team on behalf of Welsh Government to deliver personalised assessments in Wales. These are adaptive online assessments available in procedural numeracy, numerical reasoning, English and Welsh reading to children aged 7 to 14 years old in Wales. They were moved online as part of a phased process from 2018 onwards. They're now an established part of the educational landscape in Wales, and indeed over 1 million assessments were taken in the 2021-2022 academic year. We've used the full capabilities of Surpass to deliver key features for this project.
Firstly, to support dual language applications in Wales, we make items available in both English and Welsh in the numeracy assessments. The assessment is scheduled in the learner's preferred language, but as this sample shows, if at any point they're unsure about the wording in one language, they can toggle to the other to check for terminology. Next, we developed hint questions to support the assessment of numerical reasoning. Numerical reasoning was the last subject to move online because it's the most challenging to assess in an on-screen format. These items needed to be computer marked, but reasoning is a complex skill, so they didn't lend themselves to the one-mark automatically marked format. We think that the multi-mark hint questions offer a sensible route between really complicated scenario single-mark questions which cause validity issues, or just simply saying this is too difficult. This is a sample Year 2 to Year 3 hint item. The hint can help the learner access the question, giving further insight into the problem as the number of hints increases. This encourages resilience, a keep going, keep trying approach. Here's how it works. If the learner attempts a question but gives an incorrect answer, this window appears, letting the learner know that they've made a mistake and offering them a hint. The learner's first attempt will remain visible on screen in the case they forget which answer they gave. Then below that is where the hint appears. The first hint is always check your workings. If their next answer is still incorrect, the learner will be offered the next hint. The learner will continue to receive hints until either they get the answer right or there are no more hints available. There are usually around 2 to 3 hints. Then they move on to the next question. This type of question was trialled extensively with learners before it was launched in the 2021-2022 academic year.
This program was particularly interesting to me, having gone to school near Cardiff. It's great to see an adaptive national testing program being pioneered in this way by the WJEC in Wales. Finally, we're going over to Canada to hear what Andy Thomas, the VP of Assessment, has been up to at CPA Canada.
CPA Canada is one of the largest accounting bodies in the world. We have roughly 220,000 members within our organization. So this year we delivered our examinations again for the first time, our final examination in person in exam venues across the country. Canada is a very large country, so we delivered approximately 7,000 examinations over 3 days, so in total almost 20,000 examinations across the country in about 100 different examination venues. Our largest examination venue is about 1,500 students, and our smallest examination venue is 1 student. So you can see the vast differences in our examination delivery methods. And at each of our examination venues, we have 2 different types of proctors. So we have your normal invigilators, proctors that watch the students, make sure that they're not doing anything nefarious. And we also have IT proctors available at every examination venue. And those are proctors that specialize in IT, as the name suggests, so that if anything goes wrong, if there's any technical glitches, they can jump in right away to help the students. What we do with our examination logistics is we rent laptops. So we have profession supplied laptops, and we download a computer image, which includes the Surpass secure client image, and that's how our students write their examinations. Our common final examination is made up of case-based assessments. So we have 3 days of assessments. The first day is a 4-hour case, the second day is a 5-hour case, and then the third day is made up of 3 different cases for a total of 4 different hours. We were very excited this year that the examination process went off without a hitch, and we were able to get all our examinations responses back for all of our candidates, and we are currently marking all of those different examinations. In addition to our final examination, which is all case-based examinations, we also deliver a multitude of other types of examinations. Most specifically, at some of our lower level examinations in our education program, we deliver MCQ type assessments, and we deliver in total across the entire year well over 50,000 different examinations using the BTL Surpass product.
A great use of case-based assessment there with the Excel simulation being used at scale across Canada. So those were our 4 finalists for the Surpass Innovations Award. It was a tough decision, and after a lot of hand-wringing, in the end, it was Michigan Language Assessment that walked away with the prize this year. Now, if you would like the chance to have a go at winning the Innovations Award yourself, then join the Surpass community, bring us your challenging testing scenario, and we'll work with you to bring your program to life on the Surpass platform. I hope you found their stories inspiring. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right, excellent presentation, very interesting. So it looks like we have a few questions, perhaps.
There's a little bit of chat going on. I know Jeff put one in there.
Okay, actually, I think those were in reference to something else. I had a few questions, Ben and Patty, that maybe you answer. So one, I'm just curious, what was was there a criteria or rubric for how each of the different entries were evaluated in this award competition?
Not particularly. So every year we have the Surpass conference, and that is just a gathering of all of, well, for layman's terms, all of our customers, I suppose. We call it the Surpass community. That's all of our partners meet people, and all of our customers get together. And we just thought it would be a good idea post-COVID, first time everyone's doing it in person. So many interesting stories to tell. So rather than just get everybody up on stage talking about it, let's ask those who couldn't maybe get a full presentation together if they just wanted to submit a 2-minute pitch as to why they thought they were using Surpass in the most innovative way. And that was it, really. Unfortunately, we were in to have like this big celebration and voting session at the conference, everything else, but because of the train strikes that happened in the UK, we had to cut down the conference starting time and everything else. So we ended up actually choosing the winner based on a panel of people that we're working directly with the Surpass community. We call them the Surpass Community Committee that help us to organise that conference. Does that? Yeah.
Yeah, that does. I'm in my personal observations, I'm seeing ESL tailored assessments and assessments with language and translation features really kind of becoming a lot more prolific. And in keeping with the theme of this year, Context for Assessment Innovation, I'm wondering if that's just coincidence or if there's some greater contextual factor that's really impelling a lot of innovation in this area.
Paddy, feel free to jump in because you probably see more of this from the business development side, but I will answer very briefly if I may, because I work quite closely with one of our other customers, Telk. That's the German organization for language assessment. They currently deliver tests in, I believe it's 25 of the core European languages, in line with SEFA guidelines. Now, they actually joined us about 5 years ago with the intention of translating paper tests to on-screen to meet various goals that they wanted to achieve. So I don't think it's something that's specifically coming around this year. I just think that, well, speaking from the Surpass side of things, we have the technology that allows people to do a real life simulating test on screen that would normally have to be done in a test center with a person. You know, as they talked about in the first video there, we can limit the number of playbacks. We can have forward only sections, so you're emulating only being able to hear the examiner speak twice. Sorry, Paddy, you looked like you were going to add something at the start there.
You stole my thunder, Ben, I'm afraid.
Sorry.
I don't know what the impetus for such an interest is, but I do agree. It seems to be that we get more and more language testing organizations reaching out to us. But yeah, as to why, I'm not sure myself.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't sure if maybe it had something to do. I know there's been a lot of displacement due to different socio-political events globally. So I wasn't sure. That had been my first guess. But thanks for sharing that. Any other things or so from your experience and your kind of behind the scenes perspective at Surpass, what other kinds of innovations are you all excited about, or do you see a need for from your clients?
Paddy, do you want to take that one?
The one that I'm personally most interested in, that there are many, but the one I'm most personally interested in is our custom question framework, which allows organizations to develop their own question types, sort of exterior to the standard Surpass development cycle. And we've already had organizations use this to develop things like the spreadsheet simulator that was seen in the previous video, and many different kinds of graphing tools, things like that, diagram creators. It's quite an exciting one. The possibilities are endless, really. So that's the one that I'm most anticipating.
Yeah, I think what's truly innovative about that, it's hard to get across in a short Q&A session like this, but if you speak to the people, you know, the actual subject matter experts that make the questions, okay, loads of people use multiple choice, everything else, but you often get that thing of, oh, it'd be great if we could just have it tweaked so that, you know, doing a scatter graph, for example, if we could plot half of the items and then give it to the candidate to finish off. Well, with the CQT and the scatter graph question type that has been produced, you can do exactly that, but you can also tailor the question exactly how you want it to be. We have some really exciting stuff coming up in that, but we're not allowed to actually talk about it just yet because it's not quite ready. It's still in proof of concept stage. So I'm just going to leave that little hook dangling there. But anyone that wants to join the Surpass community mailing list, just go to surpass.com, sign up there, and we'll tell you all about these new features as they come out. And we do tons of webinars and things every time we do a new release as well. So plenty of opportunity to see what we're working on there, and our customers come on to talk about what they're working on as well. It's never just us talking.
Nice tease and nice plug there. I think maybe we have time for one more question before we go to our next session. So we've presented several tools so far, different assessment tools. What would you say is the biggest thing that sets Surpass apart from other similar platforms? Is it that customization piece that allows clients to kind of create assessments that are suited to their unique needs?
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Paddy, do you want to take this one? I would
Okay.
say the Surpass community is like a USP, but that's
what
a
I was
very
going to say.
personal. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Surpass as a platform, we build it, but we facilitate the conversations. And I mean, we've just celebrated our 15th year of the Surpass community. So, we're not someone who started up a couple of years ago and just kind of bolting on things as people ask for it. Everything we do has been considered along the journey, and we always talk to the community. We invite them to participate in innovation sessions, talk to our solutions architects, we have a test conversion services team. So if you're new from paper to screen, we can actually help you with that transition. I noticed Jeff's question about, talking about change management and working with clients on change. That is something that was a core topic of our conference this year. Our keynote speaker was a guy called Jamie Andrew, and he's a mountaineer who actually became a quad amputee after going up, I think it was Mont Blanc. He got stuck on in a snowstorm, and he was just fantastically inspiring. I can't think about the right words, but go and look him up. Jamie Andrew, great speaker. And he was there talking about small step change management. Just seeing people kind of listen to that and then have that become the theme of the conference, everybody else talking about it as part of their presentations, and then coming together to discuss what we could do next. I think the roadmap for Surpass is shaped by that community.
Yeah, that community. So it sounds like the community that you all have built over your 15 years plus in the business, and the inspiration and user-centered kind of focus that has emerged from that is a big part of your success.
Yeah, and because we rely on the community, they're the ones doing the exams, they're the ones that tell us what they need to reach their candidates, they're the ones that tell us what they need for their SMEs to work effectively and not have any blockers when they're trying to put the test together. They're the ones that tell us what they need from psychometrics and how to get the best data out of the system. So yes, we are a team of extremely talented professionals at Surpass Assessment, but it's the community that really sets what we do apart from the competition, I suppose, to put it in marketing terms.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to be on and answer a few questions. And that was a really engaging presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Christine. And I've just flipped back in because I'm going to hand back to Christine in a second. It's almost incestuous, this is. Christine's going to hand over and take on that chairing for our next session as well on assessment tools, on some of the more exciting, innovative areas around. We've got Wallace, Rachel, Jade and Scott, hopefully.
Are you frozen, Jeff? Yes, we are about to start our next session, and
there he comes. Brilliant. So, Christine, without further ado, I shall hand over.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, and I'm not going to speak too long because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to get through all this awesome content we have lined up. The first two presentations are going to show two different exciting tools to authentically assess learning. So first up, we have Wallace Judd, president of Authentic Testing Corporation, showing us how to use audio tests as an authentic assessment tool. After that, we're going to have Rachel Silva, Director of Development at Educa, sharing how learning stories can authentically assess learners in a relational way. And then to close out, we're going to have Jade, Caines and Scott Marion present on the SOAR program that is helping to improve and diversify the talent pool in educational assessment. And so a nice diversity of topics there, and then we'll close out with a Q&A. So have your questions ready in the chat. And Wallace, I'll go ahead and kick it off to you.
Thanks, Christine. I'm going to share my screen here and make it full screen if I can. Yeah. All right. There. Is that visible to everybody?
Perfect.
Okay. I want to, my name's Wallace Judd, and I'm president of Authentic Testing. And we've done testing for a good while. What you're about to see is a type of test that's faster to develop, more accurate than multiple choice, cheaper, easier to use, and requires lower readability of the candidate. I think you'll find that all of these things are real important. I want to talk about the problem as I see it, and I want to give you a clarity into our background. Authentic Testing has developed scores of tests over the last 40 years. We've done performance testing since 1989 and done a great number of them. And we've also done testing in virtual reality. So those are the three primary item presentation modes so far. But they have problems. Multiple choice testing has a guessing issue. Performance testing is good for software, but not good for other conceptual items. And virtual reality testing is very expensive. We've developed two ANSI accredited virtual reality tests and have two more on the docket. So we're interested in those three modes of testing, but there's one more that has not been exploited, and that's audio testing. Take a look at this young lady. What's she doing? She is taking a test, okay? Her test asks her a question aloud. She answers, speaking to either the phone or the computer. The item is recorded and scored. Results are transcribed and then scored, and they can be evaluated either individually or as a group. So the development process is pretty straightforward. You start and write questions. You add graphics if necessary. You can have any kind of graphics. Then you have to conceptualize the scoring. What are the right answers you're going to get? Then figure out the wrong answers, and finally list the candidates that are going to be taking the tests. Once you've done that, you can send out invites to individual candidates. They take the test by talking to their computer or talking to their phone. You create transcripts from what the people said. You score the items and finally report them. That's the entire process. Now, here's a sample of a transcript, what it looks like. What's the capital of Illinois? That's what the young lady was asked. Then she says Decatur. Incorrect. Okay, what's the chemical symbol for gold? AU. Okay, got that one right. When did Andrew Johnson become president of the US? 1817. I'll let you figure that one out. Now, the thing that's nice about Do Tell is it allows you to do graphics, video, animations, whatever you want to put on the screen, as well as text. Multiple answers are accepted. So it's not just one answer, but if a person gives a less correct answer, but one that could be conceivably scored correct, you can give it a different number of points. There's differential scoring for correct answers. There are individual scores as well as group scores, and you'll see into that in a few minutes. Do Tell helps you answer a number of questions. Should you interview this person? You may have a stack of 100 interviews. Which ones, which 5, which 8 are relevant for you to actually interview? Is this person qualified to take a course? If a person took a course, did they get the big concepts? Can they identify important elements? All of these are conceptual ideas that go along with either performance or multiple choice testing. What are the benefits? One, very low reading level, because whatever's appearing on the screen can also be spoken to them. So if they have a low reading level, it's not a hindrance. They can't make mistakes marking the response sheet. Why? Because there is no response sheet. They're going to be talking to the computer. It minimizes test anxiety because there's no difference between what the response is and how it's scored. There's no answer sheet that they can get wrong. Can they identify big concepts, and can they identify critical elements of the example? So for example, if you have a question, what's the chemical symbol for gold? There's no prompting, no cues. Whereas in a multiple choice test, here are the 4 choices: Na, Al, Au, and He. You may know He is helium, Al is aluminum, Na, don't know that. Well, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting Au. You have no 50-50 chance of speaking Au. Okay, so for example, the question in multiple choice may prompt what the answer is. If you take a look at these 2 properties on the left, in selling the property on the left, what would you say is most likely to turn away clients? Well, I don't know. I can't conceptualize that. Maybe the wires in the sky. I don't know. But in a multiple choice test, you've got clearly defined options. Landscaping? No, they're both different. No fireplace. Well, they both do have fireplaces. You can see their chimneys. No driveway. The one on the left has no driveway. The one on the right has a car in the driveway. Paint condition. That's not it. So by cueing this, you can answer it if it's a real estate question. How often should you back up a database if it's a transactional database? Speak up. Well, if you have cues weekly, daily, hourly, every transaction, the answer is obvious, every transaction. But that's not necessarily what you would get from an audio test. Now, the nice thing is, DoTell also has artificial intelligence that will categorize candidates. So here's an element test of chemical elements. The ones with yellow X's, they got everything pretty much correct. The ones with in the red circle didn't get much of anything correct. They need a total course review. But the ones with green, they didn't get their metals, but they got their gases correct. And the ones in blue got the metals correct, but didn't score highly on gases. So DoTell actually helps you categorize what kind of remediation the candidates need. It's not good for highly complex answers. It's not good for calculations. Those need a spreadsheet or something else. It's good for concepts, not how to. Authentic testing in audio is not a how-to test. You can't retake items, and it can't correct an answer as you go on. It's not an AI analysis, but in taking a short DoTell interview on your phone or laptop, if you'd like to try it, feel free to email me at wallacejudd@gmail.com. You'll find it an exciting experience, one that simplifies testing and one that is actually more accurate than multiple choice testing. And with that, I'll turn it back to Christine. Are you live, Christine?
Oh, here we go. I have to turn my mic back on. Thank you, Wallace. That was very interesting. And I have some questions, but I'm going to save those for the end during our Q&A time. Yep. So for now, I will turn it over to Rachel and we'll learn about learning stories.
Thank you, Christine. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, does everyone see this?
That looks great.
Okay, super. Thank you. Very interesting, Wallace. Thank you for having me in your hour session to share and listen. So today I'm going to be speaking about learning stories as authentic assessment and engagement with families. Learning stories originated in New Zealand, the practice of learning stories, and that is the prevailing way that educators in early childhood assess young children in New Zealand. In New Zealand's quicker than here in the States. They realized very quickly that checklist assessments for young children were not authentic. They were not giving educators the ability to really look at the individual child or communicate in a way that was meaningful for engagement. And so they got together, and with the work of Margaret Carr and Wendy Lee, who spearheaded their early learning group, and developed this practice of learning stories. So just a little bit of a quote that I happen to love from Margaret Carr in the beginning. And we're talking, gosh, over 20 years ago now. We got together, and the practitioners and I wanted to cease the notion of assessment, shake it around a bit, turn it upside down, and find something that was part of enjoying the company of young children. So what is authentic assessment, and why authentic assessment? Very often when I speak with educators, and I'm kind of doing the presenting and answering for you here because I don't have the attendees who are able to speak in, but feel free to use the chat and Christine can fill me in on what you're saying. But why do we authentically assess young children? Very often I hear educators say it's to help transform parent relationships and let families know what learning is happening inside the classroom. Very often when we're looking at the growth of young children as they are in a classroom, we are focusing on their learning journey. Where are they starting, and how are they growing in different areas of development? We are building portfolios, enduring records of a child's growth and journey throughout a school year or their time in a school. And I do want to just kind of interject on my own presentation and let you know that while learning stories were developed for early childhood assessment, in New Zealand, we are seeing kids who have had learning stories written for them from educators now taking on their own portfolios and doing self-learning story reflection stories. And we have teachers that write learning stories for each other, peer review learning stories. And we also have administrator walkthrough learning stories. So learning stories are not just for early childhood, but because many of you either have never heard of learning stories, or this is something a little bit familiar that you're dabbling in, I am focusing on the original population that learning stories were created for. So in the States and in many areas of the world, educators still do need to link to measures or frameworks for reporting purposes. So we are able to write learning stories and connect to different framework measures for reporting, but we want to emphasize the practice of learning stories because we want to see a child, not a checklist. And we want to assess authentically so that we can plan and individualize learning for students, and look at kids in a very strength-based positive way. One reason we assess that many educators do not say when I ask, why are we assessing, is for themselves. And I always want to emphasize to teachers, no matter what level they're teaching, that assessment should be as much for their reflection and practice as it is for the child and for the family. And if we are doing our job and we're using assessment with purpose, I always say it's a really great opportunity to look at what we're teaching, how we're teaching, why we're teaching. Is this resonating? Is it time to do a reteach? Really reflect on our own practice and the decisions that we are making as educators. So write stories that make a difference, recognize the privilege it is to enter children's lives in this way. And this is a trace of your professional life as well. So that is the difference between authentic formative assessment versus summative, giving a test at the end of a marking period, writing, filling out a checklist. So how come when I go into early childhood programs around the country, I'm seeing a lot of this versus this? And I beg the question, what would you prefer? I mean, I would love to hear the feedback that Christine's getting on the chat or the Q&A. Would you rather this or would you rather this? So these are learning stories. What are learning stories? Learning stories are really, they are authentic, heartfelt, positive approach to assessing young children and, or like I said, assessing adults. There are three parts to a learning story: the observation, what we see, what kids are actually doing in that moment. And these are usually written to the child and about the child so that it's meaningful and it's heartfelt. And when families are reading it, they know that their child or group of children are being seen. What learning is happening here is the second part of a learning story, where we are lifting out the learning for our families in language that they can understand. And when I say that, I don't even just mean layman's language, our everyday language versus measures on a checklist that mean nothing to families. I mean that we can write learning stories in other languages so that there is equity and diversity in the populations we're writing learning stories for. Educa, which is the company I work for, we have a platform to write learning stories. We also have an academy where we do professional development around learning stories for early childhood and beyond administrators, coaches. And one of the features in our platform is the ability to voice to text, text to voice, and do translation so that stories can be read into a platform, and families who maybe can't read or there are different languages, this can bridge the divide amongst those populations. And the third part of a learning story, opportunities and possibilities. What's next? That goes back to what I had mentioned earlier, which is, what is assessment for? It's for us to be able to look at children and plan for those children, for us to connect with families, and to be able to reflect and plan next steps for a child or group of children. I just want to go back to that really quickly. When I mention opportunities and possibilities and planning, I would like to believe in this world of beyond multiple choice that we are not giving tests and then just moving to the next unit, or coming into a classroom at any level with prescriptive curriculum, that if we are allowing our children to take the lead on their journey as educators, they are the primary teacher, and we're there to offer possibilities for them to stretch their learning and go on this journey. Children see magic because they look for it. You will see it too if you look through their eyes. So this is what a learning story in Educa might start out with. We have this platform that makes it easy for educators to write learning stories in real time. And you have the architecture, I should say, of the learning story, where you're writing to and about the child, interpreting that learning, and writing what's next. Learning stories can be written on paper. They don't have to be written in a platform. Very often I'll have teachers who write notes in the classroom, take photos. They're not sitting there writing learning stories to kids while they're with their kids. But then they go to their platform to move that information and those notes and their thoughts to the paper. I want to read you a learning story really quickly. I feel like this is like speed dating, that you're all on this wonderful conference getting a lot of information, and then you get to know me a little bit, and you can always reach out to hear more. And I hope you ask me on a second date. I'll give you my email later, but I do want to read a quick story to you. Lucian, the artist, this is the first part of the learning story. Lucian, you always blow me away with your amazing creativity and your willingness to share your art with others. Your art is so colorful. I can see you learning to mix colors and play with different textures. You love painting with the dish scrub brush today and pouring your paint before scrubbing it. You can see that you mixed yellow and red to make orange. What a fantastic discovery. Your love for painting is equally matched with your love for sharing with others. I have a large collection of Lucian art above my desk at school and in my home. And this story goes on really describing the teacher's love of what she is seeing Lucian doing, and then providing the family with what learning is happening here. Unlike many toddlers, Lucian's giving knows no time constraint. Other toddlers give you an item and ask for it back shortly thereafter. Researchers believe this is a toddler's way of discussing an item. When Lucian makes art, he intends for the recipient to keep the painting. This shows a natural inclination to share for keeps, a developmental milestone that usually occurs in older children. And then there are opportunities and possibilities. What's next? We are then able to connect to frameworks. We're able to connect to measures that we need reporting for one reason or another, whether we're collecting data, whether we are getting funding that we need to provide reports for, but it's not first and foremost. The first thing we're doing is writing that learning story, and then naturally, those measures are being met, as opposed to what I say reverse teaching, which is let's use a checklist and then let's see what the deficit is and go back and teach it. So this is happening naturally. And by writing in a way that families really can, that resonates with them and is meaningful, we are getting a tremendous amount of family engagement back. This is another very a much shorter story. Learning stories can be 2 sentences. I believe that if we are watching children or even writing what we hear them say or do, that you can lift anywhere from 8 to 30 measures of learning from one learning story. And this is a learning story about Alice, who really planned with purpose around making this train set. And she wanted to build a bridge, and she really thought about her plan and executed that plan. And this is all written, like I said, to the child and about the child, thinking about opportunities and possibilities, linking to a gazillion measures, but that learning story came first. Those measures are really the footnote. And then by writing this learning story, we're getting this huge, tremendous amount of family engagement. So we're writing to the child, about the child, interpreting the learning, and then we are connecting and collaborating. Group stories. Group stories are so important. We're always looking for kids to share and work together. And as we move up kids' tenure in a school, they're doing project-based learning together. They can write about their project. They can write what they're learning. They can write about opportunities and possibilities. So this can run the range of preschool and beyond. I have college professors that have their students who are in education writing learning stories when they go out into doing their student teaching, and they come back to the classroom and they really look at what each other have observed and think about where the learning is and what the next steps are. So this can really really the range, and this is a very small, not as lengthy a story, but you can see just how much learning is happening. Today, Alice, Daniel, Jane, Emma, and Elvie had a great time playing with Play-Doh. They got to mix the flour, cornstarch, oil, water, and turned really thick and formed a ball of dough. I mean, I don't have to tell you, we're not just talking about colors, but we're talking about science, and we're talking about math and sharing and caring. And then we're writing the learning happening here and the opportunities. We also print these stories and we make beautiful portfolios for the kids inside their classrooms. I'll show you a picture. It's not showing on Zoom, which is another reason that we have learning stories, not just to share with our peers and with our families, but with the kids themselves, which is, to me, the best part, having kids read stories about their favorite subject themselves. And it's another opportunity to authentically observe and assess. Christine, how am I doing on time?
You have about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good. Okay. So helpful learning story prompts. The first part of the story, we're thinking about what's capturing my attention. What am I excited about when I see kids at play? Many parents know their kids are in a play-based site or they're doing project-based work, but they don't really know what learning is happening. And so the learning story format allows for us to lift that out. What does this show me about the child? What are they trying to figure out? What are they understanding? What are some theories behind the work that they're doing? And of course, those opportunities and possibilities. Asking a family member, very simply, a question. Does your child like to do this at home? Is there anything you'd like to offer me? Which is inviting that family engagement back and forth. And once again, inside of Educa, we can then connect to frameworks. So family engagement is so important, especially in the early years, but my son's in college and I still want to be engaged. Maybe I need to stop doing that, but learning stories empower families to engage, collaborate with each other, inform what they're doing in their practice, and individualize children's work. And There are no 7 wonders of the world in the eyes of a child. There are 7 million. I love that quote. And to recap, we want a title, a photo, video, story, what it means, opportunities, possibilities, frameworks, and of course, responses. And if this picture doesn't say it all, look at how excited this child is to read their own learning story portfolio. Just some testimonials. Families love getting learning stories about their children and hearing about what their child is doing along the way, not just at the end in a report card. And so if you have any more information and want to hear more about learning stories and how it can relate to the work you're doing at whatever level you are working in, feel free to contact me, rachel@educa.com, go to our website. And we also now have a Learning Story Academy where we offer a lot of professional development. As I mentioned, for coaches, for teachers, for families, it's runs the gamut. How'd I do on time?
That was perfect. You planned that
Yay, thank
perfectly. Thank you. And for everyone watching, Rachel is also on our last episode of the Beyond Multiple Choice podcast, so you can hear more about learning stories there, and we got into even some other details that she didn't go over in this presentation. So check out the BMC podcast. And yeah, this is going to be a fun Q&A discussion. I'm just building up my own questions, and feel free to put yours in the chat. I see we have one in the Q&A box. Keep them coming. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jade and Scott. I think it's just going to be handling your slides, right, Jade?
Oh, he's going to contribute as well.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be in community with folks who care about innovative assessment. So Scott and I are going to do a tag team, and he's going to start. So take it away, Scott.
All right, thank you. I was waiting for Christine to unmute me there, so let me just get these fired up. Okay, great, welcome. It's great to be back at this conference again, and I'm excited to partner with my friend and colleague, Jade Caines Lee. So I'm the executive director of the Center for Assessment, national, international consulting firm on all forms of K-12 assessment. And one of the struggles that we have is finding ways to diversify the talent within our organization. We have a very talented organization, but as anybody who works in educational measurement, particularly on the technical side, you know that it's a real challenge to find people of color or really other non-whites or non-Asians who have the PhD degrees in either psychometrics or measurement or some related field. And so we've been thinking about this for a while and what we should be doing about it. So this is also comes at the time when finally, although folks like Edmund Gordon have been writing about this for 50 years or more, we've really, as a field, starting to take equity and social justice much more seriously in education, but also in the role that assessment plays in supporting or constraining progress towards equity. And there's a lot of factors at play here, right? We have more segregated schools now than we did 50 years ago. So there are a lot of, sociological and political factors at play, but we also believe that assessment plays a role in these inequities, even if it's small, proportional to other influences. We're both leaders of assessment organizations. We're not politicians or large-scale policymakers. So we are choosing to act in the realm of assessment. And if we're interested in addressing inequities in assessment or in social justice issues in assessment, it seems odd that we're going to do that with just the typical constellation of folks working in the field. We need to find ways to diversify our field. Now, there have been and there are programs focused on graduate students of color. I remember back when I was first started graduate school in the early 90s, I was helping one of my advisors who was working on an NCME task force trying to figure out ways how to support students of color in graduate school and to attend the conference and things like that. But we think that graduate school, while incredibly important, is late. It's the people have already made their decisions about what they want to do, and curiously, there's not many people who go through high school or undergraduate say, I want to be a psychometrician. Actually, I don't know anybody who's done that, and so we thought that we need to figure out ways to focus on trying to get more undergraduate students, quantitatively inclined undergraduate students, into this so-called pipeline. And I'm going to let Jade take it over from here and talk about the program we've partnered to launch.
Yes, I'm excited to share more about that. I just want to take a pause and say, yeah, I feel like over the last year, I've been taking more of a poll in all of the spaces where I give talks or presentations, and sort of by show of hands, how many of you knew you wanted to be in the field of assessment when you were in high school? And not one person has raised their hand. So I think not only do we need to be thinking about this in terms of the field, right? And diversity is important on multiple different levels, especially in terms of ethnically. But also, I think we need to be thinking about it as it is a good career option. It is really a viable career option for folks who have certain interest in research, certain interest in data. And so I'm excited that Scott and I have been working together for the last couple of years to launch a program that specifically is designed to bring awareness of the field to a particular population, specifically Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students. In these first few years, we're focusing specifically on Black or students who identify as Black, and really thinking about undergraduate years as a prime opportunity to expose students to the field. Thinking about eventually, if they show interest, supporting them with graduate school application processes, thinking about entry into doctoral programs. But it has to first start with awareness. And most people, I don't think, even know what the word psychometrics means, especially at the freshman, sophomore level. So we created a program called the SOAR program, which stands for Strengthening Opportunities for Underrepresented Students in Assessment and Research. And we have taken flight this year with 6 young scholars. We had our first summer. The crux of the program, although there are other elements, the crux of it is an 8-week paid summer internship. And so these ladies on the next slide were our first inaugural class. Next slide, please. And so I had the privilege of directing the program, which meant that I had a lot of opportunities and touch points with these ladies weekly. They all did an 8-week summer internship, hybrid/virtual, with 3 of our partner sites, Gwinnett County Public Schools, Southern Regional Education Board, and Cognia. I really want to give special acknowledgement to these partner sites because this was a brainchild of a few people, and not really knowing if it was something that had legs and that would be viable and useful. They took a chance, and we really appreciate their mentorship of these young ladies. And so these students come from 3 different institutions: Agnes Scott College, Tuskegee University, and Emory University. There was a rising sophomore, 1 rising junior, and the remaining 4 were rising seniors. And so throughout the summer, I had an opportunity to support them in their summer internships at their placement sites, in addition to some additional activities that we'll share more on now. Next slide, please. So just to get a little bit deeper into the program components, like I mentioned previously, the crux of the program is the summer internship. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were having some level of orientation for the students. We called them scholars. So although they are interns in the normal context, I like the idea of giving them an opportunity to feel like we really did appreciate what they were bringing to their internship sites. So we called them scholars. So these scholars were able to engage in an orientation with myself. And though in that orientation, it wasn't just like these are the nuts and bolts of what you need to know. These are the forms you need to fill out. It was also the idea of building a cohort. And I have had the blessing and privilege of being a part of a lot of different programs throughout my educational journey. And always the cohort experiences were the ones that helped me feel most supported. And I know that from the research and the literature, when you think about diversifying a space, especially a career field, you can't just think about one-offs. You really have to think about not just recruitment, but retention. And so having more than one scholar in one site was a purposeful decision that we made in order to think about that support, and the cohort building activities were really critical for that. We also did a mentor orientation where the folks who were going to be working directly with the scholars, how were they thinking about this internship opportunity? What were their expectations? Especially if there was a cultural gap, we felt like it was really important to make sure that there was sort of a setting of the stage and an expectation setting for everyone involved, including the mentors. There were weekly mentoring sessions that I had with the scholars one-on-one. We also had small group mentoring sessions, and we also had weekly lunch and learns where we invited guest speakers. Most of them were Black, Latinx, or Indigenous guest speakers who came every Friday for 1 hour to talk with the scholars about their journey into the field and some of the work that they do. So the scholars were able to get some level of exposure to what you could do with a doctoral degree in educational psychology with a focus on measurement, or a degree specifically in educational measurement. There were skill building sessions where some of the scholars were really able to learn more related to certain topics in the field, such as standard setting, and then more general skills in terms of report writing. And then finally, the summer internship experience ended with a capstone symposium where we invited lots of guests to hear and learn from the scholars about their summer experience. So it was really a great opportunity for the scholars to share with an audience broader than just their cohort on the experiences that they had and the knowledge that they gained. Next slide, please.
Get there. There we go.
So we wanted to share with you just a few quotes. We did do an informal evaluation where we had someone else ask the scholars some questions about their experience and also give a survey. So we wanted to share with you just a snippet of the scholar experiences. This is really just a snippet given our short time with you all today. So although I know you all could read by yourselves, I'm going to read it to you so we don't have this long, silent, awkward gap. Being in college, and especially a psychology major, it comes along with research, but not as much as research as in the internship, especially over the last 2 months of working with SREB. It was way more research that I had to obtain that I would have normally. Another scholar said, the two biggest takeaways are that one, research can be tedious, really tedious. What I was doing, it was surface level, but this time it took a lot to find what I was looking for. So I'm clicking this link and going through this search and just doing all types of things to make sure that I'm finding what I'm actually trying to research about. Next slide. Another scholar said, but the purpose was really just to get more experience as far as research goes. I'm not the most comfortable with it, just because it's a lot of numbers and everything. So that was probably the biggest point, really getting comfortable doing research and having that firsthand experience before graduating from undergrad. And I want to stop just really briefly and share that all of the students were majoring in psychology. Another scholar shared that, but just at the young age that I am, and the youngest scholar, she was 18, and the oldest was 22. But just at the young age that I am, that was a great opportunity, obtaining advice from different people of different professions coming to speak. That was a great takeaway of the experience overall. Dr. Jade just taking the time to just sit down with us individually, just helping us rebrand ourselves. That was a great opportunity. Next slide, please. And then another scholar shared, yeah, I would say this experience definitely has been really fantastic. It's definitely an upgrade from my past summers and other internships. I definitely love the travel, because some scholars did have the opportunity to travel to go to standard setting meetings, as well as cohort building experiences with other internship programs that some of our partner sites had going on. It's definitely an upgrade from my past summers and other internships. I definitely love the travel. I love meeting people with the same backgrounds, Same also around my age as well, and just being able to get different insights and just advice from a lot of other people. So these are just snippets of some of the experience the scholars had. Not all of it was rosy, so we definitely did get some good, important feedback that is going to help us think about next steps. Next slide, please. And so some general takeaways, there's more than these 3 bullets, but we only have a short amount of time with you today. So number one, we know we can't address equity issues and assessment without thinking about the talent pool. Who are the folks that are creating the assessments? If you look around your offices, and at least this day and age, a lot of folks are working from home. But if you think about our field, how many folks are different than you? How many folks bring different perspectives to the assessment development process? And yes, as Scott mentioned earlier, we can't, it didn't begin with assessment, so we can't solve it, without thinking about political issues and sociocultural issues. But we do have a role to play. And I think that these pipeline programs, Scott and I are really passionate about the idea that perhaps these types of pipeline programs can help expose talented Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students to the field of educational assessment and measurement, and potentially spark interest in future opportunities within the field. Also, another huge takeaway is that organizations that do assessment and measurement really have to think about investing in that pipeline diversification process earlier than grad school. Specifically college, I would love to see something in high school, but they must do it robustly. So the fact that these partner sites were courageous and interested enough to take the time, because there's a lot of time to mentor. Mentoring is time intensive, and they really did get some value added from the scholars contributing to projects that they're currently working on. And not just robustly, but also consistently. It can't just happen with a drop in the bucket. It really has to be a sustained effort. And then finally, another takeaway that we would like to share with you today is that it really does take a village. Partnerships with organizations are critical to this work, and those partner organizations have to be committed themselves, not just from the senior leaders, but all the way down to entry-level staff. So if you think about diversification, you also have to think about the environment in which you're trying to diversify. If you were to recruit talent that was different than most of the folks that are in your office, will they feel welcome? Will they feel supported? What kinds of structures are happening in your space professionally that would make it so that you're not just recruiting folks, but you're also thinking about ways in which they would want to stay and be retained within not just your organization, but also the field writ large. Next slide, please. So we're excited to share a little bit about next steps. Hopefully I'm not too far over on time. So first, we're excited that we're knee deep in recruitment for phase 2. We are looking to expand to add additional partner sites as well as additional institutions that'd like to partner with us, specifically still thinking about historically Black colleges and universities. But we are excited that if it gets legs and if there are more people who show interest, we would like to partner with other minority serving institutions, because that is often where a lot of talent lie and a lot of opportunities for career development may not necessarily lie. So the opportunities for students who are interested in math and interested in statistics and interested in psychology, often the lower resourced institutions don't necessarily get folks coming to their career fairs. So we really wanted to target minority serving institutions. And so we're recruiting right now. We're also developing the SOAR Ambassador Program, which is an opportunity for for students and scholars who did the summer program already, the summer internship. So they're now alums of the program, but perhaps they still want to be engaged. So those who are really interested in thinking about participating in the recruitment, as well as engaging in webinars and additional skill building opportunities. And then also we are doing some knee-deep strategy development for institutionalizing our efforts. So what's working well and what can we continue to do that's sustainable is a really high concern for us. And then finally, we're really excited to partner with potential partnerships with researchers who might be interested in documenting our journey. So we're doing the programmatic piece and not necessarily the research piece, but there might be folks out there who care about broadening participation in STEM disciplines, specifically assessment and psychometrics. And so we would be interested in partnering with folks who would like to do that work. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm looking forward to a robust and fruitful discussion.
Thank you
Great
so
job.
much, Jade and Scott. That was really interesting. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. I'll invite Rachel and Wallace to rejoin us and turning on their cameras and mics. And
it won't let me unable to start video. That's really weird.
Video has been disabled.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Brian maybe
There you
needed
go.
to- There we go. All right. Wallace, I am going to start with just a few questions I had about your presentation.
Sure.
So
Go for it.
Do Tell, yeah, the Do Tell technology, I thought was really interesting. I had some questions. So in if I remember correctly, when you were describing the process of creating an audio assessment, you said that you have to input the right answer, but also the wrong answers.
Well, you can input a number of correct answers and give them different points. And then you can input a number of different incorrect answers that you anticipate and give them negative points. And if you get a response you haven't expected, you can actually listen to the transcript, listen to the recording directly and say, well, they meant to say this, we're going to give them credit for it, or count it off. So you can do whatever kind of scoring in whatever level of detail you want to.
Gotcha. How do different accents or mispronunciation factor into that? Is that something that the test creator would have to anticipate and record?
Well, in the first place, it'll take a wide variety of accents. It's been, tested with that. But if something comes through that it can't evaluate, you can listen to the transcript and hear what they said and score it.
Gotcha. Hearing about the technology and having been a classroom teacher myself, I was thinking that it seems like a really great tool for having students practice like spelling or recitation, memorizing different passages. Are you seeing anyone use it for that kind of purpose?
Well, yes, but it's much broader than that. For example, in crane operators, we can have a video of a motion about a crane and then have people interpret that. That means raise the ball, or that means move over, or whatever. So you can use it as flashcards if you want to.
Interesting. Rachel, I'm gonna switch it over to you now. So I love the concept of learning stories. As I was watching your presentation this time, I was wondering, and I don't remember you touching on this, how frequently, what is kind of the cadence of how often teachers are creating these stories? Is this like a daily or weekly practice?
No. So typically in New Zealand, and we try to practice, look to New Zealand since they started with learning stories, and now we're bringing this practice here. So typically, if we write 1 to 2 learning stories per child per month, we will meet all the measures that might be required for reporting. And that doesn't mean that in between you can't also be journaling for kids or sending group messages, or but as an assessment tool, 1 to 2 stories, I like to think 2 per child per month. Not only is that doable, but as you saw, one story can reflect on so many measures of learning that if a family member is getting a journal or I have my background thing on me, so it's hard to see, a learning story journal, and you have that for the year, that's going to really show such growth of learning over the course of a school year. Or many of my sites, they're year round, so it's even like more remarkable. But yes, so 1 to 2 stories per child per month is best practice.
Gotcha. And are these stories being compiled by like experiences or observations that are being documented just throughout the month, or do teachers usually like have a specific project where they're observing learning?
Usually it will, to make it authentic, it's just anything that's happening in the day. I mean, when we talk about authentic assessment, assessment's happening all day long, every day, in our answers, in kids retelling a story, in the questions that they ask, in the play that they're doing, in the choices that they're making. So I would prefer that teachers are just looking at opportunities, things that stand out, watching what kids are doing versus through like a specific project, because then you're kind of like designing that experience versus keeping it real. And most teachers are thinking about the voices of their children, regardless of the age or stage, or things that stood out that were different, or choices that they made, or sharing or caring in the early years. You know, just taking that opportunity to ask a friend to share or see or show signs of empathy or caring. And those what we call tiny moments really stretch out into so many different areas of growth and learning that we can use for a story.
Gotcha. Thanks. And then, so to Scott and Jade, that was really interesting and seems very necessary to have that kind of intentional effort to diversify the workforce and educational measurement. It stood out to me that you said all of this past cohort had a background or interest in psychology. And I was wondering if that was a coincidence, or if that is where you're finding the most natural interest coming from, or if you specifically recruited from that area of study.
Yeah, that's a great question, Christine. So it was purposeful and trying to think about, like, I love research, and I don't know how I don't remember the moment when all of a sudden I realized that I love it. I taught research methods for quite some time, and I also started in the K-12 classroom. And I tried to think about what are the pre-skills and the pre-experiences that might give someone a penchant for research, right? And so when Scott and I were chatting about it, it's sort of like, well, psychology students often have labs and have experiments that they might have to run. So there might be an interest in research. Clearly, that's not the only major, but I also had conducted a research study earlier this year that was sponsored by an organization called Women in Measurement. And they funded me to do a qualitative study where I interviewed about 25 Black, self-identified Black women who were in the field of educational assessment. And the number one criteria was that they got a doctoral degree in a field related to assessment, measurement, ed psych. And almost all of them majored in psychology in undergrad. So I said to myself, and I just completed that study earlier this year. So I said, okay, you know what? I think we're onto something in terms of like the gateway major. But what I found is that obviously psychology majors at different institutions are not all required to do the same types of things. And so to my surprise, quite a few of the scholars had not had any research experience in their psychology major, had not entered a lab, did not. It was more clinical in a different way, and it wasn't research-based. And so what we're thinking about in terms of recruitment for this year is opening it up to other more liberal arts majors. So I'm thinking like sociology, we're thinking political science, math, even folks who are majoring in education. One of the things that we're very clear about, though, is that in the STEM world, there are a lot of internship opportunities. So if you think about folks who are majoring in computer science or engineering, we're not looking to compete because we feel like there's a sweet spot of folks who might be housed within a college or school of liberal arts, but they still have social science interests and they still have courses that they take that are social science related. So that's something that we're opening up for this second year, but it was a purposeful decision, and having to pivot because not every psychology degree is created equally.
Yeah, no, that's very enlightening. Thanks for sharing that. I was also curious because I think you mentioned that your partners, so like Gwinnett Public Schools and Cognia. You mentioned the kind of investment and buy-in that is needed for them to take on these cohorts and invest in them, but they also see a return and benefits in doing that. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that. What are the specific feedback you're getting from your partners as to how this partnership is worthwhile for them?
That's great. I love that question. And I kind of wish that there was some audience interaction, because I know that one of our partners is actually in the chat, Mark Johnson at Cognia. But one of the things that I heard very directly, because I also did post-summer conversations and debriefs with all of the partner sites and the folks who were key in making the internship go. And some of the feedback was that, yes, we had the scholars working on like actual deliverables that were necessary for some of the work that we're doing now. And so when I heard that weeks after the scholar, one particular scholar did the work, finish that particular part of the project, and that they're still using that deliverable in their meetings and in their decision making, that's pretty. And that was the student who had just finished her freshman year. And so that's pretty amazing, just in terms of thinking about the kinds of contributions that undergraduates can make to assessment related projects. Obviously, coding, at the highest of levels, and scaling and equating and all the things that folks often learn in the doctoral program are not tasks that we would ask the scholars to complete, but there were meaningful contributions that some of the scholars were able to make. One of the scholars participated in a standard setting meeting, and they flew, Cognia was a part of getting her there. And the person who led that standard setting meeting said, oh yeah, she was instrumental in terms of being boots on the ground with some of the technical things that they had to do in relationship to making the standard setting meeting be efficient and be productive. So there was some good feedback from not all of them, I have to admit, but yeah, for some of them, there was some good feedback around the types of contributions that the scholars were able to make to actual projects related to assessment.
And just one other thing, Christine. So we tried this as a proof of concept. We wanted to see if we could get this off the ground, and we're thankful to our partners. I'm thankful to Jade for leading this, and we're excited to go bigger this year and to eventually even scale it up further, because there's a tremendous need, and we saw there's tremendous interest as well. So the proof of concept works. So now, like other research, we're going to try to scale it up a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your work in that area. Just that insight that, the research experience itself is such a valuable thing that you're offering these young people that they might not otherwise get, seems so important. I know we seem to be doing pretty okay on time. Are there any final questions or insights that any of you wanted to share before we move on to our keynote? All right. If not, then just thank you all so much. Those were all really interesting presentations, and we appreciate you for taking the time to share your knowledge with us.
Thanks.
And
bye-bye.
Thanks, Wallace.
Thank you.
All right, and to close out today, I'm going to get ready to hand off to our closing keynote speaker, Daniel. Daniel, am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Jarratt?
Dan Jarratt.
Dan Jarratt. Dan Jarratt is a fellow at Schmidt Futures. Schmidt Futures is a philanthropic initiative of Eric and Wendy Schmidt that bets on early on exceptional people making the world better. Daniel focuses on learning engineering, which aims to improve educational outcomes by leveraging computing and data to dramatically increase the effectiveness of learning science as a discipline. And our panelists yesterday in our closing panel discussion kind of teed up this keynote by mentioning the value of learning engineering. And Dan was previously a founder and head of learning science technologies at Infinite Campus, the education data management system for 8 million US K-12 students in 2,300 education agencies. So Daniel, we're really excited to have you on today and teach us more about learning engineering. And with that, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to share my screen. Well, thank you for your time today, everyone, and thank you to Christine and the conference organizers for the time. I'm very excited to be here to talk about assessment and learning engineering. The title learning engineering, the future of education R&D infrastructure, admittedly a bit grandiose, but I want to spend some time today talking about why we believe this is a worthwhile vision and the work that we're doing to make this a reality, not just ourselves, but the education field. For the time today, I've got some messages that I want to share. The first is to talk a little bit about Schmidt Futures itself, the fact that we fund advanced education R&D, and I'll talk about some other work that we're doing too. The second message is that the learning engineering community uses computational methods to advance the pace, relevance, and use of learning science. And I want to talk specifically about some motivational use cases and opportunities that we've seen. And then the third is the challenges and opportunities of the field as you use learning engineering to move beyond multiple choice. So I am a fellow at Schmidt Futures. Schmidt Futures is a philanthropic initiative of Eric and Wendy Schmidt. As you may know, Eric Schmidt was CEO of Google and later chairman of the board at Alphabet, and has a very good idea of the power of large data systems to make an impact in the world. Now, as Schmidt Futures, we are a philanthropic initiative, and we take risky early stage bets on people and ideas to develop solutions and pave the way for business and government to help scale them down the road. Most of the money in the world for R&D or for scaling is in business or is in government. It's not in philanthropy. Our role is to find promising people and promising ideas early on and to help them be successful early so that they can scale up through traditional governmental or business means later. We look for the promising, the overlooked, the experimental. We look for visionaries who could do so much more if given the opportunity. And we find people who stand apart, and we help them stand together to make things better for all of us. That together is key. So in our work, we do three things. We build networks of exceptional people. We focus and mobilize those networks of talent to solve specific problems in science and society. Learning engineering is part of that. I'll talk about it. And we create platforms to scale the solutions that work. So a couple examples here. We build networks of exceptional people. Well, here are two of our programs. RISE is a scholarship program for 15 to 17-year-olds. This is a global program, and we partner with organizations around the globe, for instance, NBA Africa, to find young people who are brilliant, who are promising, and who might not otherwise be found through traditional talent identification networks. And when I say talent identification networks, that includes traditional things like college admissions. The Quad Fellowship is for promising people who are more advanced in their career. These are STEM postgraduate students. Quad refers to the Quad countries, Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. And we want promising STEM graduate students to study in the United States, so we pay for that. We just launched this with the leaders of those 4 countries. You can see my CEO, Eric Braverman, on stage launching this initiative with President Biden and the 3 prime ministers of the Quad countries. We also focus existing networks of talent on specific hard problems in science and society. And then we help those people to work across fields and across organizations so they can get better results. So let's think about science for a moment. This can be a golden age for scientific discovery. We have technologies like optimization techniques or machine learning, and those can make possible levels of ambition and scale and efficiency that were unimaginable even 20 years ago. So we build networks of researchers to imagine and build those technologies. We also lead what are called virtual institutes. Those are groups of funded organizations that solve these hard problems across locations and across fields using modern tools. And then they share things like data or equipment or methods. The Learning Engineering Virtual Institute is one of them. I will describe that. We also care about specific hard problems in society. too many people are excluded from advances of the past 20 years. This reduces competitiveness, it shrinks the middle class. It's worse for all of us. And the pandemic, of course, made the disparities much worse. So we imagine a future in which everyone can participate in and benefit from the progress of the digital age. So we bet on innovators and teams that promote thoughtful uses of technology for shared prosperity. And finally, we advance common goods for common good. And this is platformization. We think about the things that these teams need to have in order to advance as a sector. Open source data, systems, equipment, partnerships, to help the best ideas and research efforts grow and replicate. So an example here are focused research organizations. This is a new type of nonprofit startup for science. We put money in to enable fundamental research that requires unusual levels of scale and coordination, but is not yet rapidly monetizable by industry. That's what I was talking about when I said we take early bets before government or before traditional business would care. All right, so this is why I'm here. This is why we care about learning engineering. We are building the field of learning engineering, which uses data and computing methods to advance the learning sciences. But I want to start off by thinking about some motivating cases, probably many of these recognizable from your own work. Let's think about the scientists. The scientist dilemmas as you think about your own research designs or implementation. Social science can be challenging for many reasons. If you're in schools, for example, you have to have legal agreements and recruiting. It's often done education agency by education agency. That takes time to recruit. You have to find people in each organization to say, yes, we want to be part of your research project. You have to get the lawyers to all agree. Sometimes the superintendent gets involved. This is a lot of work. That means that recruiting usually happens where you get the most bang for your buck in often large urban school districts. You get a large population, heterogeneous population, and you only had to sign a single legal document. That's great, right? Well, it's not great because it leaves many, many, many types of schools, education agencies, and populations out of social science research. In addition, interventions can often take a long time. We are familiar with program evaluation or curricular evaluation, interventions that take weeks or months, sometimes years, to fully implement. That means that the cycle of improvement for those is quite long. If you're writing a textbook, it might take 2 years to author and get that tested. So the cycle of improvement is slow often in social sciences. That might be okay if you're creating the program. Like if you're an academic or maybe you're a publisher and you're an adult and your job is to make these things, it might be okay if it takes a couple years. But shift your lens to think about the people who you're serving, the students. They're only in 4th grade once, for example, we hope. And those students need rapid improvement. It's not going to be okay for them if you improve a program or a textbook 2 years from now. They're gone. They're in 6th grade. Again, we hope. For individual students to make progress, we need rapid cycle experimentation or rapid cycle improvement. You, of course, from the assessment community, have a great deal to do with that rapid cycle progress. In addition, these interventions are often hard to generalize. It can be difficult to describe the core components, or maybe if you do, it's hard to work across the sector to say, what I'm doing in my intervention here shares properties with what you're doing with your intervention over there. This can even be simple things like object identifiers or even academic standards. Like how do you describe the fact that something is tied to a specific academic standard? If you're really lucky, you're going to use something like the Academic Standards Exchange Student Data Interoperability Protocol. That'd be great, but not everyone has done that. And finally, we have problems not just with data access, but with technology transfer. Often, people who are doing social science, education science are doing so within an academic setting, and it's hard to transfer insights into materials that get into the classroom. If you're working for a publisher, sure, it's easier because you have the infrastructure for that. But not everyone is doing that. If you're at an education college, how are you going to get your insights into practice? That is the traditional research to practice pipeline problem. Here are some examples of people that I have worked with. The names are changed, but the stories are real. So Alicia waited a long time for longitudinal data access. She was funded for a statewide research project, but it took 1.5 years to get that state to say, yes, you can come use our state longitudinal data system. Bob was funded to do a study of enacted curricula, not just the designed curricula that a publisher might create, but enacted curricula in the classroom. How do we know what the teachers are doing? Well, the traditional ways are teachers self-report or by having some sort of sensor in the classroom. But both of those are hard to do for a lot of reasons. Bob wants to do this without adding reporting burden to the teachers. And finally, Carlota is funded to do a study where she needs to link disparate data sources in real time across 250 schools. This is a tough task, but she was funded to do it. She wrote a research design to do it, and now she needs to do it. So let's flip over to another use case, the engineering use case. And I'm going to say engineer here. It tends to be software development. If you are creating an education technology system, you have a variety of challenges. You might know how to create software and ship it into production. That's great. But how are you choosing what to create? The traditional way of building software is by using product managers or other people who talk to customers. And in fact, in the education world, often education technology is created through RFP line items. If you are creating a piece of technology and selling it to schools, often you're responding to a request for proposal. And those requests for proposal documents might have 2,000 line items in them that you have to say yes or no, or maybe later to all of them. RFP-driven software development can present challenges for improvement and experimentation because the school district or the State Department of Education has already decided what they want. So if you are doing improvement or experimentation, it has to be with the consent and the cooperation of the people who gave you that RFP in the first place. So how do you even hypothesize? How do you experiment? Usually ed tech companies, even if they have the legal ability to experiment, they don't know how. Tech companies generally don't hire scientists. Some do, it's great if they do, but it's not often part of their core mission. And so to do an experiment, they need help. They need to understand research design. They need to understand the practices that all of you as scientists understand. And then finally, like how and what to measure. This is of course something that you know intimately well. If you're an engineer, you measure what is easiest to measure because of course you have limited time in your day. So that ends up being things like numbers of logins, click streams, time on page, and things like that. The problem, of course, is that sometimes those metrics of product engagement have nothing to do with teaching and learning. And it's sometimes unfortunate that those can be conflated. So how do you help an ed tech company understand how to move from pure product management metrics to something that is aligned with the needs of teachers and learners? So these are also people who I have worked with. Danielle is creating a system to match tutors and tutees. That match is key. How do you, in a pedagogically sound way, at scale, figure out which tutors should work with which students? Edgar has a system which it's a math curriculum, and that's great. It's one of the adaptive instructional systems where you can jump in at the right point, at the right time for the right student. But the word right there is tough. How do you figure that out? And Edgar wants to do that without having a really big assessment instrument that students sit through. So how do you figure out the quickest way to onboard new students into this adaptive system and get them to the right piece of curricula at the right time? And then finally, Francine, she cares about student engagement. And it's not just engagement when I say like logins and clicks. She cares about the cognitive or the action sense of engagement or disengagement, the sort that a teacher learns how to do within a classroom setting. But if you're not in a classroom setting, if you're in an online learning platform, how is it possible to create real measures of student engagement in the learning platform in a way that complements or helps the teacher in what the teacher is naturally being taught how to do? Now, I've talked about two different families of job responsibilities, scientists and engineers. But of course, we are only two job families out of a very large community of people who care about teaching and learning. I've been in data science for a long time, software engineering for a long time, but of course, there are plenty of other people who belong in this conversation as well. And so the slide highlights some of them. We absolutely value the contributions of everyone as they think about learning engineering to advance teaching and learning. So the mission that we are driving towards is to improve education outcomes by leveraging advances in computer science to accelerate the pace, relevance, and use of learning science. I'm going to talk about exactly how these advances in computer science can help with the challenges we just heard of from those personas. Learning engineering can help you in a few different ways. When we think about learning engineering, one of the advantages is rapid cycle experimentation. It's hard to improve outcomes for individual children if you have really, really, really long cycles of feedback. As you know from pedagogy, one of the most important things you can do in a classroom is have rapid feedback for a student to help them learn. But the same is true if you're designing materials for them. How do you make sure that the right materials get to the right student? And even if you're not in charge of the individual instructional platform, how do you more quickly get to better materials for schools? I've often heard Mark Schneider, the director of the Institute for Education Sciences, that's the funding and research arm of the US Department of Education, talk about the 5-year, $5 million problems where they spend money, they spend time, and most of those efforts fail. And that's fine, because often you get no results in science. Often businesses fail. We expect this. The idea is that if we're going to fail, we want to fail faster. And when we see success, we want to help that replicate as quickly as possible. Right now, we fear that things are too slow and too expensive. So how can we drive to more rapid cycle, less expensive experimentation that is grounded in good research design? As a motivation, you can think of something like what, from the user experience side, called A/B testing, where randomly users of a website are given one of two different experiences. And the randomization is key. The technology does the randomization for you. And then there's some metric that the system designers have chosen. For things like Amazon.com, the metric is going to be money, of course, but it doesn't have to be. If you do it within a learning environment, the metric can be tied to learning outcomes. So what we dream of is A/B testing at scale for education, where there's appropriate randomization of experiences. They can be very small changes. It could be just the way that sentences are ordered in a paragraph, or it could be something much larger. And where the metrics, these measures, are appropriate for the context. Learning engineering can also be different in that it can talk about bringing people and data together in new ways. As you're probably aware, education data is often really siloed, and those are for good legal and technical reasons. The education agencies often own a lot of the administrative data. Assessment companies own the assessment results, and usually that's shared in some way with the education agency. Publishers own their texts, and so on. And so if you want to study these processes in a systemic way, you want to join the data sources together. But that's hard. That requires a lot of technical and legal and business and process concerns that are just frankly really tough. Now, we, from the funding perspective, understand that, and we want to fund people who are excited to tackle those challenges. Networking people could also be something else. It could be platformization of research design. So if you create a technological system that is good for experimentation, and it's just within your company or your university, we and other funders care about platformization of that research design so that other scientists elsewhere in the world can easily use your platform to do good science. This is not just our idea. People like the National Science Foundation and the Institute for Education Sciences are funding this style of work too. You can look at IES's program for the Digital Learning Platform Network to see 5 examples of how the US Department of Education funded platform efforts where other scientists can apply for federal funds to use those existing platforms. Or if you don't have funds, you can apply yourself. I want to give another motivating example from my own history. Infinite Campus is the education data management system for more than 8 million US K-12 students in 45 states. That's 2,300 local education agencies, and they did the data collection and reporting services for 7 state departments of education, who have a very good idea of what education data management at scale looks like. And I have a lot of learnings from my time at Infinite Campus, where I co-founded the data science capability there, and I founded and led the learning science technologies capability. One of the things that we learned early on was that a common data model is crucial. And I say common data model, that means a few things. First was that it was literally a common SQL data schema across the customer base. Other student information systems, for a lot of very good reasons, allowed education agencies to customize the data schema, where maybe individual school buildings or individual years the data could look different. That's great if you want customization, but it's really difficult if you want to do analysis at scale across time. Infinite Campus chose another path. They enforced a common SQL data schema for all customers for all time, and then individual customers could add on top what they wanted, but they had to use the base tables, and there were lots of them, hundreds of them. This was really important because it meant that analysis could then be done, again, with appropriate legal and security protections. Data analysis could be done across all of those education agencies. This allowed us to do some pretty cool things. We heard from one of our larger customers, a state department of education, that they wanted to improve their school dropout early warning system. We did so, but we didn't just improve it in the data querying perspective. We improved it from a statistical perspective. And the way that we did that was by training a statistical model on a lot of different school districts, not just one at a time, but many, hundreds, thousands of school districts. And we looked at the patterns of administrative data and some learning data that showed students' pathways to not persisting to an on-time graduation with their entering cohort. This was really powerful then, because we could take that statistical model, put it behind an API, and make it part of Infinite Campus so that every school district who wanted it could have their school counselors look at student level dropout predictions. Well, that's fine. It's built into the student information system. But a key value here is that it did not require data to move between systems. This was data that was already in the student information system across multiple contexts. This is key. Attendance data, behavior and misbehavior data, course and other academic performance data, home and enrollment stability data were all in there. And it was relatively real time. We were able to make new predictions every day, which was orders of magnitude faster than competing systems. Competing systems had to wait for data to be reported across agencies. We did it within a single platform. Again, the power of the platform is rapid improvement, rapid experimentation, or rapid reporting here. If you'd like to read more about the system, I wrote a systems paper called Machine Learned School Dropout Early Warning at Scale, and you can go to Eric and download and read that. We are pushing, and I say we, Schmidt Futures, is pushing learning engineering forward in a few different ways. Number one is platform instrumentation. For people who have existing digital platforms, we want to empower them with tools that researchers need. That is, we fund the platformization of learning science, of good research design, of recruiting, of experimentation. Another way that we work is in talent. We want to drive top technical talent to work on learning engineering. So sometimes these are things like sponsoring computer science students to attend education data science conferences. Or sometimes it's things like paying for fellowships so that, for instance, a talented researcher can go to the Federation of American Scientists and then advise the federal government on how data science and learning science can work together. This is what we've done, and we've seen great impact. And then finally, market shaping means that we want to promote this to other entities that have the power to shape markets through their activities, business and government. And co-funders, by the way. For our work, we often will go to other funders and ask them to co-fund programs, and we will often promote the vision of learning engineering. You should go and look up what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just announced. It's a very, very large program for middle school math. And the National Science Foundation is just starting a mid-scale research infrastructure program that we support as well. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about exemplar solutions, which is things that you can look at, which I think you'll enjoy because you can see how people have taken the qualities that I've just talked about and built them into real systems that real teachers and students are using. The first is from UCLA's Teaching and Learning Lab, the Better Book Project. In this talk, I've spent time on curriculum research. I happen to like it. It's not the only type of learning science, of course, but it's an area that there's a lot of room for improvement. In traditional publishing, you have researchers who find insights, move that into the design and development stage, which then moves into course materials, and eventually gets printed or maybe digitally delivered and shipped to instructors. That is a linear process, and it might take 2 years. We care about ways that all of these people can work together in the same real-time system. So the Better Book Project has a few different innovations, but the one I want to focus on is that this is a digitally delivered set of textbooks, data science, statistics, they're working on algebra now, and individual items in the textbook are checked into source control in the same way you would do code. And they are subject to A/B tests. So as a student is moving through the digitally delivered textbook, they might randomly get one version or another version of a piece of content that has been authored by an expert. Then we have rapid cycle feedback because there are embedded and formative assessments throughout the textbook. And the system understands that if a student, that as more students get more of those assessments correct, then the random treatment that they were given is more likely to be the better one. I mean, this is a traditional A/B testing model. But the way the Better Book Project has done it, it's for K-12 education or early post-secondary education. This works. You can go use it today. You can use it in your LMS today. You may also be familiar with Carnegie Learning, which is a large math curriculum and assessment platform. They've been doing experimentation internally for a long time. They're quite good at it. Something that I really value about their approach is that they also care about doing science with partners who are not in Carnegie Learning. Upgrade is a platform, an open source platform for A/B testing in curricular experiences, and you can use it. You can be an author. You can use Upgrade as a way to test out your own content in a formal setting. I highly encourage you to go check this out. Another example of using technology to improve experiences, we funded Hee-Jae Lim, who founded Talking Points. This is a way to use technology to engage multilingual student families. That is, families who have a different home language than the common language of instruction in the school. It is crucially important that those families understand what's going on in the school building, but if there's a language barrier, someone has to translate. So Talking Points is a way to use automatic and human translation to do that. They have translated something like 100 million conversations between schools and families by this point. And we've received co-funding from Google and other foundations as well. I highly encourage you to go read more about them. Beyond those specific ones, we have a couple funded programs I want to talk to you about. The first is open now to you, to everyone, called the Learning Engineering Tools Competition. And this is a way that people who are really excited about the learning engineering ethos and have made some progress on their tool to compete for prizes. We have something like $3 or $4 million in prize money right now, including partnerships with other foundations, to through a judged process to select high quality tools who best embody the learning engineering ethos. Last year, we had 800 applications from 60 countries from very well-respected organizations. And you can go read about our 30 winners. They're really impressive people. This, by the way, we just opened it now. It is open for applications. Please apply. We also have a different type of model, a Learning Engineering Virtual Institute. Well, the tools competition is prize money for work that's been completed already. The Virtual Institute is funding for research and development that has not yet been completed. The mission of the Learning Engineering Virtual Institute this year, in its first year, is to double the rate of math progress for middle school students from low-income families for users of particular tools. And we intend to fund roughly 4 to 7 teams. We've received proposals at roughly $1.5 million to $2.5 million per year for research and development. And they can apply for up to 5 years of funding, although we do have annual evaluations. We will be selecting teams that use advanced computational techniques. These are things like sensors, better ways to understand what is going on in a student's head, what's going on in a classroom, what's going on in a community, or complex interventions like intelligent tutoring systems, or ways to use chatbots, or ways to, an example from before, using tutor and 2D matching. We are extremely interested in tool development that uses learning engineering principles that can show evidence that these tools can double the rate of math progress for low-income middle school students. And finally, we sponsor things like code competitions. These are also things that you can get involved with. On Kaggle right now, Kaggle, that is a site where people who are interested in machine learning or data science can try their own code in a competitive format, and the winners are the ones who have the best scores based on a hidden evaluation data set. We put a data set up that uses student writing samples, and the goal is that students should get feedback on their writing samples. If you're doing that at scale, and you want to use natural language processing techniques to do so, we believe that you can find the best approaches through a competition. So go on Kaggle, look at it. The feedback prize will allow you yourself to try out your machine learning code, if that's what you're excited about, to see if you can generate the best feedback automatically for writing samples. But even if you're not interested in machine learning yourself, you can read the conversations that people are having about the best ways to approach the problem. It's really interesting. Completely separately, EDI is an assessment company based in the United Kingdom, and they created a very large data set of student answers to assessments. And then they put that data set with our funding into NeurIPS, the Neural Information Processing System, which is a large machine learning conference. Again, to help machine learning teams have the data to create large-scale education technology. Large-scale edtech doesn't happen on its own. You have to support it with people, with data, with the users who care about it, with systems and schools that value it. This is part of the formula. So as you think about putting these into practice, what are the challenges that I've seen in my career that I know you're going to encounter as well? One of them, clearly, is from the business and legal perspective. When you have multiple communities, sometimes the incentives are not well aligned. For instance, an academic community is going to care about publication, and they're going to care about improving science. They're going to care about impact in a very specific way. Often that's different from how business sees impact. And so when you join these two types of teams together, you have to pay careful attention to aligning incentives. That's something that Infinite Campus put a lot of time into when I was there. Schmidt Futures funded the University of Minnesota to hire 2 postdoctoral scholars into the Learning Informatics Lab, which is a lab that is multidisciplinary and at the intersection of the College of Science and Engineering and the College of Education and Human Development. And these postdoctoral scholars had 2 homes. They had the University of Minnesota home, where they had academic output, and they came to Infinite Campus for product output that was specifically consistent with why education agencies procured that system in the first place. And because we had to care very deeply about the legal protections of the student data that the company was responsible for. And speaking of consent and governance, it also requires a whole lot of thought about who owns the data, who is responsible for protecting the data, and who should even see predictions. For instance, that early warning system that I talked about, we only showed the results of that system to counselors in the school districts. Even if when we had a student level dropout prediction score, we didn't tell the student that. We didn't even tell the parents that. We told the counselors that. The counselors were the ones who had the best subject matter expertise and all of the context to understand how that could be useful in the schools. Then from the data perspective, I saw a few different problems. Number one is, if you're going to be measuring interventions, you need the interventions, of course, to be implemented with high fidelity, but you also need the data to have high fidelity. The number of times I saw missing metadata was 95% of the time, right? And yet you don't want to add tons and tons of burden to everyone involved to keep adding data and keep adding data. And so we care about ways that metadata management can reduce the burden of this high fidelity data descriptions, where lots of people can benefit. In the same way, data have to be accessible to researchers, and yet they need to be secure. These are at cross purposes with each other, frankly, but you have to do both. We have a legal and an ethical responsibility to keep student data private and secure. But we also have a responsibility to improve the education experiences at an individual level for all of the children in our care. And so research data has to be accessible and has to be useful. And I've done a lot of work with groups like the National Science Foundation to think through what are large-scale data management practices using novel technologies that can make data available to researchers in a highly protected way, where there can be audits and governance around exactly who sees what at what time, but where researchers don't have years of waiting time or having to go to a physical computer lab with a key to access data. And finally, when you're doing learning engineering, when you're building a team, when you're building capacity, there are lots of scientific values that we care about. For instance, good research design, openness or open science, consistency across teams. And so the best learning engineering capabilities are going to improve the field's capacity to be consistent, to be talking about the same things between academic papers or between systems, to promote the values of open science, and when there is good research designs, to make that easier to use, like basically make the good things easier to use and the worst things harder to use. That can be a user experience design or a platform design decision that you as educators, researchers, and technologists have the power to do. When you see something good, you encode it in your system so that other people can benefit from what you know. So I appreciate the time today. You can reach out to me. You can write to learning-engineering@schmidtfutures.com or me at djarratt@schmidtfutures.com. Find me on LinkedIn. But you can also do some specific things. Number one, join our Google group. We have a learning engineering Google group that's open to everyone. You just have to say request to join and we'll let you in. If you have data sets that you're interested in, whether you want the data or you want to make data available to the sector, we've got lots of interesting ways that benchmark data sets can be used, including in the code competitions. And then finally, you can join our existing tools competition today. Go to toolscompetition.org and keep an eye out for future competitions. Like if we have the Learning Engineering Virtual Institute 2.0, then we'll announce that probably in the spring. So keep up with us. We value you as members of our community and all of the tremendous work that you are doing to advance assessment for the good of learners around the globe. Thank you for your time, and I will definitely take questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was, wow, a lot of very interesting information in there. Some went a little bit over my head, so I'm excited to go back and review it when I post this recording to YouTube. That was all very useful. We only have a few minutes left, so I don't have time for too many questions, but one thing that really stands out to me with what I've seen of Schmidt Futures and what you all do is just this strength around bringing together diverse people from different groups, like you said, the researchers and the engineers and the education practitioners to really attack these problems in a collaborative way. One of the challenges that I see, you mentioned kind of sometimes there's difficulty in getting these incentives and goals aligned. Also, I wonder if you have any insight around just getting a shared language, because sometimes these different areas of expertise can be very jargony. Interested to hear if you have any insight on that or other just best practices on how to facilitate cohesion and collaboration when you're bringing such different groups together.
Those are excellent questions. Truthfully, I see one of the values of the education technology community as a convening mechanism to bring people together at the point where you're creating a product that gets in front of students or teachers or parents. We in the academic community will often have other scholars as our audience, or maybe leaders in education agencies where papers are our output. And it's easy to get into, like you say, the jargon world, because we're speaking to other people who know our language, our vocabulary. One of the best ways to get out of that is to work in product design, education technology, or frankly, even the curriculum authoring, something where you're at the point, like a common point. And for us, the common point is the point where students are interacting with learning objects or teaching objects. If we can gather there, because we know that that's the most valuable point, because that's where the students are, then we are forced to collaborate and forced to create a shared understanding of jargon. We still immensely value all of the background knowledge that people are bringing to that, but it forces us to work together in say a product design or technological design place.
Very helpful. Thank you for that. Yeah, another question I had, which I think you may have touched on a little bit, to what degree do you see government, specifically bureaucracy in government, as still kind of being an obstacle, even as you're working to kind of accelerate the research and design process of getting these tools developed? Or to what degree is that policy and bureaucracy still creating hurdles in actually getting it into the hands of students and schools?
Government is not an obstacle. Government can be a partner. Government is us. I mean, it's the people. For me, it's the United States, but of course, governments around the world. Government can be a customer. Government could be a co-funder. Government is a protector. In its best sense, government protects everyone and gives access to everyone. So we understand all of that. Where we see a value of government is when we have tried something and it works. We need scaling partners who are accountable to everyone. Like, we are accountable to our own principles. We're a funder. That means we're accountable to people like Eric and Wendy Schmidt, as well as the people who we've made commitments to through our impact. But that's a pretty small group of people. If we're truly going to make change in education, we need to do that through mechanisms that are accountable to everyone and where there is democratic input from everyone. Government and business are by far the best ways to accomplish that. We're not going to do it ourselves.
Yeah, very, very nuanced. You kind of put a little different spin on that. Government can be a partner who holds you accountable to the common good. Oh, actually, we're at the end of our time now. And unless there are any other questions from the audience, I don't see any right now. But thank you so much, Dan, for your time and yeah, for sharing all that really valuable information. And we will have it posted on our YouTube channel as soon as possible. All registrants will receive that link in a follow-up email. Dan, thank you so much.
Welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.